Why do I stand up here? Anybody?
To feel taller.
No. Thank you for playing, Mr. Dalton. I stand upon my desk to remind myself that we must constantly look at things in a different way. You don't believe me? Come see for yourselves. Come on. Come on. Just when you think you know something, you have to look at it in another way. Even though it may seem silly or wrong, you must try. Now, when you read, don't just consider what the author thinks. Consider what you think. Boys, you must strive to find your own voice. Because the longer you wait to begin, the less likely you are to find it at all. Thoreau said most men lead lives of quiet desperation. Don't be resigned to that. Break out. Don't just walk off the edge like lemmings. Look around you.
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Mehak Vohra. Mehak is the founder of Jamocha Media, a digital marketing agency that works primarily with early-stage tech companies. Her firm specializes primarily in user acquisition and growth marketing. Before the launch of that company, Mehak made YouTube videos on her channel, whatthemehak, it's a sweet name, where she documented her transition into college. Now she has transitioned her channel into daily vlogs, and she makes videos about what it's like being a young entrepreneur. So Mehak, that's the intro I have for you, but tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I run this growth marketing agency in San Francisco. I dropped out of school in May. And yeah, we've been doing it full time now since August. So over the summer, I worked development jobs. So I studied computer science actually at Purdue. And one of the things that I saw was that a lot of the companies that we had coming out of Purdue had trouble taking their product to market. And having this background with YouTube, it made sense to maybe try and help these companies take their product to market.
So tell me a little bit more then about Jamocha Media and what exactly it is that you guys do. You mentioned that you were working with some pretty cool names in maybe the YouTube and also startup space.
Yeah, so right now we funnel all of our clients through VC firms. So whenever I first moved out to San Francisco, one of the first things that I did was I tried to connect with as many VC firms as I possibly could, because whenever you're working with a startup, you of course want it to be a startup that has some capital to spend on marketing, and they're ready to, so like that's like the first really big thing. So basically that's how we started, and then from there we've worked with a lot of accelerators, and we help companies that are more consumer facing grow through social media. So we try a lot of growth marketing, like white hat stuff that are a little bit more fun and unorthodox, but it's ways to get our clients' names out there. So
white hat. So give me kind of an example of maybe some of the types of specific marketing you'd do for these companies.
Yeah, so like we'll do some like email scraping and a bunch of we'll do ad testing, and we'll let's say like we have a client that comes to us and says, hey, we're trying to figure out if this new feature will work for our product. One of the things that we'll do is we'll scrape emails and try and send them out to people that might be interested in their product and get signups, so they can take it back and say like, look, these are people that said they're interested in our idea, and let's try and build that out. So we help people validate as well.
Okay. And how long has that been going now? When did you say you started that?
We launched Jamocha September of 2015.
Okay, September 2015. And that was while you were still in school at Purdue?
Yes, I was starting my sophomore year at Purdue.
Okay, so tell me that story then of how that transition to dropping out came about, and why you made that decision.
Yeah, so the summer before I launched Jamocha, I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I was interning for a digital marketing agency. And actually, I'm going to take this back a little bit more. I had done this YouTube channel since my senior year of high school. And I thought it was really cool. If I were to tweet something or if I were to say something in my videos, there's a lot of power in having a voice and having people listen to what you have to say.
Yeah.
And I kind of became really obsessed with that idea of like, oh, awesome. Like I've developed this little following, and it's cool to like sway people's opinions and to make them think in the way in which you're thinking and to show your perspective. And towards the end of my freshman year, I'd been doing my YouTube channel for a year at this point. A group of Purdue officials approached me and they're like, hey, we know what you're doing and we think it's really cool. I also helped run the co-working space at Purdue, the Anvil. And they were like, we really like what you're doing with the Anvil. Would you be interested in helping us launch our social media platforms? And about 5 or 6 of them asked. Yeah, so it wasn't the school. It was like officials at the school, especially within the entrepreneurial community. So people running like the Purdue Research Foundation were really interested in trying to get more of a social media presence. Yeah, and they were like, hey, we're looking, can we pick your brain? And 5 or 6 people asked me within the span of this evening once. I came home and I actually called my mom and I was like, like, what if I started something? Like that sounds fun. So then I moved to Chattanooga. I ended up working with a digital marketing agency all of summer of 2015, and I learned a lot of how they did things. And then I launched my agency in September, and about a month in, we signed our first Y Combinator company. And from then on, I was like, all right, like maybe I might. Yeah, that's a big deal. Have something here. Yeah, especially like the sophomore in high school or in college that like, we did a pretty good job with them too. So at this point I was like, okay, yeah, they're willing to recommend me, like we can move forward. And then it just so happened that in November we had an alumni from Purdue come, and he had this huge multi-million-dollar company, and he said, if you're really serious about dropping out, I'll help you move out to San Francisco. So yeah, then in the summer of this year, I did that. School ended the second week of May, and the third week of May, I literally signed my lease on the way to the airport. I was like, all right, I guess I'm doing this.
So when he said he'd help you, did that mean like he'd become a client of yours, or just kind of?
No. So actually, over the summer, we still weren't making enough capital on which I could live in San Francisco. It's a pretty expensive city. Yeah. So one of the things that I did was over the summer, actually, I lived in Santa Clara, which is like it's a suburb of San Jose. So it's about an hour and a half Caltrain from San Francisco.
Okay.
And I worked as a dev for his company, a developer for his company for the summer, and saved up a little bit of capital before actually moving up to the city.
Gotcha. So he gave you a job, and he's basically able to float yourself till you build the company up enough. I see. So going back a little bit, I had a question. The first Y Combinator company that you got as a client. So how did you get them? Like, how were you able to sell them on your agency?
Yeah, so we were actually really lucky. They were actually out of the Anvil, which was the co-working space that I ran. They had gone.
So had they known you previously then?
Yes. So yes, they were really good friends of mine, and they really took off last year as well. So growing with them was really fun, and they definitely really helped us out in the beginning, figuring things out.
Gotcha. So you were really able to it sounds like you were able to really utilize a lot of the resources at school that you had as far as Anvil goes and the relationships you developed to launch the company.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that is the thing that people really mess up with or don't really think about. If you're in university and you're like, damn, I really want to leave and it's holding me back, really use the connections that you have at your university, because it gets a little bit harder when you try things out on your own, because you have so many people that are constantly changing and thinking about new things. And it's stupid if you don't take advantage of it.
Just squeeze all the resources out of them and then ditch it. Peace. No, I like it. Okay, so tell me then about your YouTube channel. So you said you started that back in your senior year of high school, correct?
Yes.
And then how was that fitting into this whole transition. You mentioned that you were doing videos about your transition into college. Did you kind of do some
Yeah.
vlogs about your transition out and the startup? And
Yep. Yeah, so that was actually, it was really interesting. So I started it on January 1st of 2014. And I realized that year I was finishing up my senior year of high school and I was going into my freshman year of college. And that was going to be like the first year that I was going to be on my own. And I thought it would be really interesting to document how I changed because, you know, you go from living under your parents' roof to moving 7 hours away from home for me. So I was like, okay,
Jeez, yeah.
yeah, like this will be interesting for me. So every Sunday for that full year, I made a video talking about my week and what I learned from it. And by the end of it, it's really interesting for me now to go back and see, wow, like I changed a lot. Like I became so much more confident in myself and I figured out really what I wanted to do within the span of that year. So it was really cool to see that transition.
How many subscribers do you have?
We're approaching 1,000.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we actually just hit 100,000 views.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, it was.
So do you have? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to ask. Do you have people then that have basically followed your whole journey from high school to where you are now, and what's that like? Is that pretty cool?
Yeah, it's actually even more the process of leaving school that I've had more people follow that. But you know, the channel started off with just my friends and family watching me and saying like, okay, cool. Like it was a good way for them to keep tabs of me and what I was doing. But what I started doing was in the beginning of this year was I did daily vlogs. So I uploaded a video every day up until March. And this was really interesting because one thing that I didn't really anticipate was that because I was doing daily vlogs, a lot of my friends were also in my videos, and they were a lot more willing to start sharing my videos as well. So my audience grew like by 300% within the span of my first month of doing daily vlogs. And I was like, whoa, like, damn, like that's like pretty cool. So actually we've like doubled in subscriber count this year just because of those 3 months that I did vlogs. And then we actually just started it back up a few weeks ago.
Where do you hope to take it? Are you going to keep? Are you doing any the vlogs right now still, or what's the plan for the future?
So it's not every day. I try to, if a really cool day is coming up, I'll vlog it. I don't really have many plans for it except for just sharing my story. The really interesting thing was that because I was shooting my videos at Purdue, we had a lot of incoming students watching my videos. So I was pulling in our prime around March, around 10,000 views a month just from incoming students that were interested in seeing what Purdue University was like. And what it was like being an entrepreneur, and then leaving Purdue's campus. It's kind of funny because being on Purdue's campus, a lot of people know me because of my videos, and then to like leave it and then like no one knows me, it's kind of funny.
Do you have any aspirations to monetize the channel or grow it really significant? I mean, it seems like a lot of the people I know that are doing YouTube, you know, they all want to be the next like Casey Neistat and stuff like that. Or for you, is it just kind of, you know, throw your story out there, and if people want to watch, they can watch? And
yeah, you know, it's I started it off more for me, and all of my content. It's kind of one of those things where they're all videos that make me really happy. So I haven't really done anything that's more like facing my viewers. And it's funny that it's grown to even where it is now, because it wasn't really something that I anticipated. It was more of like a project for me to see, it was more for me to watch my transition and see myself grow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like definitely in the future, I might try to hone in on it a little bit more. But right now, it's just kind of one of those things that I do for fun, and it's interesting, especially with the daily vlogs, to see how I spend my days. So like, okay, like this is where I've wasted my time today. It's like you go back through it and you're like, oh no.
Exposed for all the world to see how Mehak spends your time. So yeah, just less focused on basically, it sounds like what people want to see from you, and just more what you're doing. And if people want to check that out, they They certainly can.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It adds a sense of authenticity to the channel as well.
And that's what I was going to say is some of my favorite creators on YouTube to watch are the ones that they don't really care. They're not trying to pander to the audience so much as they are just making what they love to make, and that's what people like them, or that can relate or interested in what they're doing want to watch. And so I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, tell me about your parents' reaction when you decided to drop out. That's a big question that I get from a lot of our listeners. That's a big deal. What do your parents think? So what was that like?
Oh yeah. So they were very apprehensive. I remember actually it was the month after we had launched. It was in October. It was when I first started thinking about maybe school isn't for me. Like maybe this isn't something that I want to be doing at least right now. Yeah, and I called my mom one night, and she was very, very upset.
Shoot.
Because it's one of those things where, you raise your child to go to college and to get a degree and, to follow that beaten path. And then to see, no, she wants to do something different. There's so much unknown. I think after they started to see that I was getting a lot of outside validation, and that the company's doing really well. I was getting that outside validation from friends and customers that she was like, my parents were both like, okay, yeah, fine, we'll let you take a semester off. Let's see how you do. Move out there over the summer, and then we'll reevaluate things in October. And yeah, it just kind of got to this thing where they're like, okay, fine, you're doing really well. We'll let you try things out. So it was very well thought out. It wasn't kind of one of those things where I was like, okay, I'm just going to straight drop out and see what happens. I really, really thought through it. And actually in March, I went to San Francisco for spring break, and I spent a few days up there just to see what it was like, and networking and meeting people to really know if I really wanted to move there. Because it's a big step, moving to a city that I've never lived in a city before. And I grew up in Morgantown, West Virginia. So it's moving from there to this huge city. It's wow.
So as far as your mindset was at, where your mind was at when you were thinking of dropping out, I'm curious, were you feeling more comfortable with the idea of dropping out and making plans based primarily on Jamocha Media and the success that you hoped it would have? Or was it more towards I just know that this institution is not right for me, that college isn't right for me, I'm meant to be an entrepreneur, and anything I do in school right now is not going to help me get where I want to go? Regardless of if Jamocha Media works out, where was your mindset there? Or was it kind of both?
It was a little bit of both. I knew that to get Jamocha to the next place, West Lafayette, Indiana, wasn't where I should be at that point.
Probably.
It's
probably a good point.
Yeah, it was holding me back. It was keeping me from doing what I really wanted to do. With that being said, I still hold a degree to really high value. I just don't think that right now at this time it's meant for me. I think that there's also, being a young person, you can get away with a lot, which it sounds kind of bad, but it's true. In the summer, I actually used to sneak into VC parties, and that's how I actually made my first partners for my agency. And couldn't do that at 27, 28, 29, but being a 19-year-old teenager and sneaking in, they're like, okay, yeah, fine, we'll let this kid in. It's just kind of one of those things where I realized that if I really wanted to hone in on this, now was a really good time to do it, because I had time to experiment.
Yeah. Hey, fortune favors the bold. In your experience then, who do you think should go to college and who shouldn't?
I think that if you don't know what you want to do or how you want to go about doing it, I think college is a really good place to find yourself, because you're surrounded with so many people that are constantly innovating and learning and trying new things. I think it's a really good place to get started. I credit a lot to my first 2 years of finding myself to college. I mean, I was able to collaborate with a lot of people and brainstorm and network. And it definitely helped kickstart my career. But at the same time, I think if you know what you want to do and you're ready to go for it, I don't think college should be something that holds you back.
So for the first couple of years, it sounds like you just weren't quite sure exactly what you wanted to do, and you used...
Yeah, I spent my freshman year really experimenting. So I was on the board for the Anvil, and I was meeting all these tech startups, and I was checking to see, like, okay, what are they doing to innovate? Attending a lot of meetups and, like learning in school. Like I come from a pretty traditional background. But one of the goals that I set for myself actually when I went into college was I wanted to be self-employed by the time I graduated. And one of the things that I came to realize towards the beginning of my sophomore year was that, like, why graduate if I can be successful? Like, why spend money on this degree if I can do it without it?
Right. So then I'm curious, do you think that, let's say we take you back to your freshman year, whatever age you were then, and you didn't attend college for that first year or two to kind of explore and discover what would eventually lead you to Jamocha Media. Do you think you would have been able to do that in any other environment besides college, kind of figure out a way to meet the same people and have the same or similar opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is, like, I like to think of myself as a pretty determined person, but I think college was good for me just because I was able to meet like-minded people a lot easier. I fell into more of the entrepreneurship related world, because like I said, like, I went into college thinking like, okay, yes, like I wanted to start something. But it was more that I fell into a group of kids that were also really interested in it, and they showed me the way. So at the end of my freshman year, so this was between the summer, this was the summer I went to Chattanooga. Mm-hmm. I actually went to San Francisco for a weekend with my friends. So I hadn't actually even heard of Silicon Valley at this point. So like, it was very new to me. And my friends were like, look, we're going out for this conference over this, like, the weekend. It was actually the Teal Summit conference. Yeah. There's the Teal Fellowship. Mm-hmm. So it was this conference, and they were like, look, you should come out for this. Like, we're all going out here. And these are all my friends from Purdue. And that was actually my first time of seeing all of these really successful people that hadn't gone to college. Like, I just didn't even realize that was an option. And I don't know I just don't think I had the insight before college to see that.
Right. Any of those friends, did they end up dropping out too, or?
No, actually one of them just graduated. They're all still in school. So it's kind of funny how that happened.
Yeah. So what was one of your biggest fears when dropping out, and how did you manage that?
Yeah, I think my biggest fear was actually not having the structure that university gave me, and trying to figure that out on my own. If you have classes at 9 a.m. in the morning, like, okay, I need to be up at 9, or like, there's a lot more self-control that goes into doing things on your own, and especially running your own company. Like, there's a lot of self-control that goes into that. So I think that was my biggest fear, was like, am I good enough to handle this? And then on top of that, like, not getting a degree, like, will people take me seriously? That's also something that, like, I constantly think about sometimes, is like, am I in the right place right now? I definitely think I am, but it's kind of one of those things where, like, you constantly think about it. Like, okay, you do see people who graduate and then decide to start their thing. So like, it's, there's that constant battle within yourself that, like, people let their degree define them, and that's one of the things that I really don't want to happen with me. I really want my own successes to be something that defines me. But trying to figure that out and how to go about doing that is scary. It's a scary process.
Yeah, no kidding. I remember that struggle too. A college degree is like a signal to the world of, hey, look what I've accomplished, and you've got something to back you up when meeting new people and stuff like that. I remember that was one of the struggles for me when dropping out. but then quickly coming to the realization that really, especially when it comes to employers, they don't care as much about what you studied and if you earned a degree or not. They care more, or they're more impressed by the kind of value that you've already created. And so obviously I think you've probably discovered that anybody who meets you now, I mean, you're on a podcast sharing your story because you did what it took to build a company, and you're actively providing value to the world now, where a lot of your peers are still earning their degree.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, like, if you're really determined, I don't think you need a degree. I think, like, if you know what you're doing and you're ready to go for it, and you just can't hold yourself back.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned having to be more in control of your schedule and be more self-disciplined. What's one of the ways that you manage your time now and keep up that self-discipline?
Yeah, so I actually wake up at 4 a.m. every morning, and that's actually how I get started with my day. It's kind of crazy.
That's really...
it's
I mean, five is normal, but...
No, so 4 a.m. I actually spend my first 3 hours doing work in the mornings till 7. And that's like how I get the majority of my work done, is in those first 3 hours before everyone else wakes up. Facebook's not updating because everyone's asleep. That's like when I get all my work done. And then I'll go for a run. I really try to stay healthy. It's one of those things where, like, I run a marketing agency, so I'm constantly sitting at my computer all day doing work and writing Python scripts. And, like, if you don't work out or if you don't stay healthy, it's really hard to lose yourself. So...
Do you get 8 hours of sleep?
It's around 6 or 7.
So you can function on maybe 6 hours pretty consistently?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Really?
And then actually I sometimes nap in the afternoons as well for like an hour or two. But
man, I'm jealous of that. I tried the 6 hour thing, even the 7 hour thing. I need a flat 8 hours to be able to function.
If I get a full 8 hours, I feel super groggy for the morning. So, like, it keeps me, like, pretty alert if I stay around 6.5.
No, but the habit of getting up early, and most successful people I've encountered tend to get up early, but now I'm noticing a larger percentage of them actually, they do deep work in kind of that 3 hour space before when they get up and when the rest of the world wakes up. Yeah. And it seems to be a very, I'm not in the habit of that yet. I've done it a couple mornings, and man, it sure makes a huge difference. What I like to do, which is kind of in the same vein, is work on weekends sometimes, like just a Saturday or just a Sunday, and I tend to get way more done on, say, a Saturday than I will any other day of the week, because everybody else is kind of off doing their own thing and nobody's bothering me with other work related stuff. I'm able to just focus. And so,
totally.
Have you read the book Deep Work?
I haven't.
Heard about it?
I'll have to check it out.
Me either, but yeah, I got to read that. Okay, so I really like this question here. If you could time travel back to day one of your entrepreneurial journey and have 10 minutes with your former self to communicate any lessons you've acquired with the intention of saving yourself mistakes and heartache, what would you tell yourself now?
Ask a lot of questions. I think that is something that I really was scared to do originally. Was that, like, I wasn't, like, I had this fear that maybe I'm not good enough, maybe this, and like, it was one of those things where I was constantly, like, I wasn't pushing myself. So I think in the very beginning, especially when I started at Purdue, because I was scared, and I think it's just kind of one of those things. Like, I wish, like, I would have, if I could have gone back, it would have been like, don't hold yourself back, like, do it, like, just do it. And it's funny because I sound like Shia LaBeouf right now, but, like,
just do it.
Yeah, like, it's one of those things where, don't be scared. Like, if you're going to go for it, go for it. Give it your 100%.
And especially at your age too, I'd say anywhere between 18 and even 25 years old, you're just so young. You can still afford to make many mistakes and still come back from that. I like the term. I just, a month ago or so, I finished reading the book Shoe Dog, which is about Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. And he, in the early stages of the company, kept mentioning how he was basically just trying to break the company and fail as fast as he could if it was going to fail. And that's another piece of advice I'd throw out there is if you are young and if you are thinking of doing something, by all means do it, and then just try to break it, like whatever you're doing.
That's one of Gary Vaynerchuk's quotes as well. Something along the lines of like, try to put yourself out of business, which is one of my favorites.
Fail fast, man. Fail fast. Because the faster you fail at something that's just not worth pursuing or is not viable, the faster you can move on to something that is. Tell me a story about what you would consider to be your worst entrepreneurial moment to date.
Oh, this is, I honestly, like, I'm pretty fortunate right now. I haven't really had anything, like, bad happen to me just yet. Moving to San Francisco, like, the housing was pretty hard. That's not really entrepreneurial.
So no, like, embarrassing situations or messed up?
Well, actually, so there was one time I was working at a VC firm. Yeah. I was working at a VC firm, and it was, like, my first day working
coming
there.
back.
Yeah, and I was, like, really excited about it. And I ended up, like, I ended up feeling really sick and actually, like, passing out in their lobby. And it was, like, the first VC firm I'd, like, ever worked at and, like, moved out to, and they had just hired me. And I was really looking forward to impressing them. And for some reason, I was feeling really sick, and I passed out in their lobby, and they had to call an ambulance.
Oh my gosh.
That was kind of funny.
Well, did you just low blood sugar? Did you not
I
eat
have
that
no
day?
clue what it was. Like, even I went there and they're like, yeah, you're like, your blood's fine. Like, your blood pressure's fine. I was like, I don't know what's up. And maybe I was nervous. I don't know what it was, but it was kind of funny now looking back on it that I really wanted to make a good first impression. So I'd like
maybe nervousness, huh? How long were you passed out?
It was for like a few minutes. I just remember waking up in an ambulance and being like, oh, all right. I don't know what's happening, but okay.
Oh my gosh. When I was in the Navy, we were doing some PT and stuff, and I had just been sick, and then I got back out there, and I definitely didn't drink enough water. I was stationed in Florida at the time, and we were just doing a standard PT test, but I gave it everything I had. And push-ups was the last thing. And I remember standing up after doing like 100 push-ups and standing up. And then the next time I remember I was just on the grass and there's a bunch of people over me and the instructor was over me slapping my face. And that's the only time I've ever passed out. But man, it was quite the experience. How about tell me the story of something like an aha moment in your entrepreneurial journey so far, just a moment when something clicked and it completely changed the way you worked, the way you thought about something, the way your mind worked from that point forward. Can you anything like that?
So it was in April of 2015. I was at this entrepreneurial meeting in downtown Lafayette. So basically the Purdue Research Foundation every Tuesday, the first Tuesday of every month, would do this meetup where they would invite all of the local entrepreneurs and then all of these professors that were teaching entrepreneurship at Purdue. They would come in and they would go to this bar and we'd all grab food. And that was the first night that a bunch of people were asking me for advice on how to run their social media accounts, like how to up their social media presence. So it was that day when I went home. Walked back to my dorm and I was like, damn, like, whoa, I could totally actually do this. Like, I could charge people to do this. Like, right. I have the president of the Purdue Research Foundation standing in front of me asking for help with the social media accounts. And I'm like, whoa, all right, maybe I might have something here.
That's awesome. Now, kind of moving more into the lightning round here, what's a personal habit that contributes to the success you've achieved thus far?
I overthink things, which like sometimes can be really bad. But in my case, it's always been one of those things where even though I'm always constantly self-doubting and like talking, like, you know, like self-doubting is actually not a really good way to put it, but like constantly questioning myself, you know, like it's one of those things where like I think I definitely do it more than other people, but I always try to put myself in a different perspective. I'm like, okay, how can I think about this differently? How can I do this differently? And it's just kind of one of the ways that like I do it naturally now. Like if I come up with an idea or something else that I want to implement within our company, yeah, it's like, okay, wait, what are like the bad things about this? How can I do this better?
Are you somebody who's pretty good at seeing all the do you consider yourself more of an optimist or a pessimist or more of a realist?
A realist, definitely a realist. I try to stay optimistic. I'd like to think of myself as a pretty optimistic person, but definitely a realist. Like in the end of the day, it's like, okay, this is a really like cool idea that I want to implement within our system, but like, is it worth it? Like, should we actually go about doing this? I don't like pessimists. I think they bring everything down.
But if I were to present you with a new idea, something we could implement in your business, would you be able to kind of instantly like think of all the things that could potentially go wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, like it would have to. Yeah, I would like to think so. I would think about things that would go wrong, but first, I definitely look at things that could go right with it. Right.
Do you know what your Myers-Briggs
personality
ENFJ. Is? ENFJ. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was kind of funny because I was 49% introverted and then 51% extroverted. So it was very close to being INFJ. But yeah, I have some pretty good company with the ENFJs. Oprah Winfrey. I think Steve Jobs is also an ENFJ.
I think so too. Yeah, there's some. I remember reading that. And there's some debate on like that or my personality or another, maybe an INFJ. But yeah, there's
a lot of similarities between ENFJs and ENFPs. Apparently, they're very similar.
Yeah. I'm right with you there. I can. Well, both my strength and my weakness is sometimes overthinking things. But I would also consider myself more of a realist. And man, there definitely was a time when it was just inevitable that I would probably think something to death. And now I've been able to turn that into more of a strength to think of. And my wife like sometimes thinks I mumble like a crazy person because I'm doing what you're talking about. I was just doing it earlier today. There's something going on with one of our businesses, and it's like I'm almost talking to myself. I have this internal dialogue and asking questions, thinking of it from all sides. I'm right with you there. The benefit of that has always been whenever we show up to a meeting or something, or it's time to make a decision. I'm usually very well versed in basically every option there is because I've thought about it and talked about it with myself.
Yeah, I read this really interesting thing a few days ago that you are the average of like the top 5 people that you spend your time with. So one of the things that I've really tried to work on is surrounding myself with people that I think are optimists and are working really hard and are doing, like see the world in different ways. I feel like I'm hanging out with someone and I'll say something and they're like constantly like bringing down my ideas or making me feel like I don't know anything. Then it's like, all right, maybe.
Yeah, I think somewhere between the realist side of things and the optimist side of things, I think, smack in the middle there, I think is where it's at, because there's a power to being able to foresee and think about all the bad things that could happen. And basically plan for the worst, but hope for the best, and have an attitude hoping for the best. But if something bad happens, you've already thought about it, you've planned for it.
Absolutely. I like that. Absolutely.
What is do you read much? And if so, what's a book that you'd recommend to us?
Yeah, I'm actually just finishing up Ryan Holiday's Trust Me, I'm Lying. It's an amazing book. It's a big media manipulator, so he talks a lot about ways he gamed the media for American Apparel, and a really good book.
Yeah, he's a dropout as well.
Oh yeah, yep, yes he is. It's an interesting perspective because like you see so many stories about like, oh, like this company's going downhill or this and that, but like you never really know how those stories come to light, and he really provides that insight in this book. So it's a really interesting book. The other book that I read is in the beginning of the summer that I really helped me when we first launched Jamocha in Silicon Valley was a book called The VC Game by Jeffrey Busong or Busgang, something like that. I think his name is. I'll have to look it up. But this book, he really breaks down like venture capitalists and like VC and like what a firm is and like different parts of what makes a VC firm and put stories in between of his experiences. And going into it really not knowing much about the VC world, it was really good for me to read that and see like, okay, like I finished this book up and I felt like I knew a lot. So
it's
another
a great
really
book,
good book I
kind of for
recommend.
beginners and people interested.
Absolutely. He literally starts it off with like, you know nothing about the VC world, and then
you're like, yep.
moves it up.
What's an internet resource kind of like Evernote that you'd recommend to us?
Ooh, I use Trello actually a lot for my growth hacking stuff. So if I come up with a really good growth hacking idea, I put them into different rows. So like I'll say like, okay, these are my Facebook growth hacks or my Twitter growth hacks or my YouTube growth hacks, and stick them all into like different categories. And that's the way I organize things.
And what do you mean exactly when you say a growth hack? Like give me an example.
Yeah, so at the end of your YouTube URL, whenever you're linking it to someone, putting in the subscribe ending, so like the question mark subscribe equals 1. If you put that in at the end and you send that link to someone, it'll actually automatically subscribe them to your YouTube channel. So,
no way.
It's like, I think they have to like click a button or something, so like it comes there, but like they won't let you see the channel until you click the subscribe button. So like it's like,
so if they want to see the video, they automatically subscribe.
That's kind of one of those funny things that I'll do if I'm linking my channel to someone or like working with someone else. Whenever you're linking your YouTube channel, making sure to put the channel into a playlist and then linking them the video in that playlist. So they, because YouTube does like up next. Sometimes the video they recommend aren't yours. But if you link them a video that's within a playlist, YouTube will play the next video in that playlist. So they kind of get stuck in this loop of seeing all of your videos on the side. So that's the other thing.
Interesting. I like it. Now, last two questions here. What advice do you have for any of our listeners who are thinking of dropping out of college to pursue more the entrepreneurship route, but they haven't quite made that step yet? Just some parting advice.
Yeah, I think what you really need to do is talk it out with your friends and family, and then really see if you haven't gone to university, like, okay, what can I do if I really want to go for it, then go all in on it. But if you are in university, really use the resources that your university has to propel yourself into dropping out. People don't take advantage of the university because it's like, this place is holding me back and I don't want to be here anymore. But that's just a lot of resources that are ready for you and they're at your fingertips. And it's something that if you don't take advantage of, you're missing out.
So if somebody's already in college and then maybe they come up with an idea like you did, or people are asking them like, hey, can you do this? Can you do this for me? And they think, I might have a business here. Utilizing those resources as much as possible, maybe getting something solid, start earning some revenue would be your suggestion before making the jump there. Yeah. No, that's good.
I think it has to be really well thought out. Not that I think that, as I said earlier, that you can't be successful without a degree. You can be successful without a degree, but it's just important that if you do decide to take that route, that it's something that you have the mindset to go after it, because you don't have that degree to fall back on.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too is if you do decide to drop, you can always go back, and we've mentioned that several times on the show. I mean, if it just doesn't work out. Dropping out doesn't mean you lose all
anywhere.
it's not. You don't lose those credits, and you can always go back.
Absolutely.
So what advice do you have for any of our listeners who are more in your situation, who've already dropped out and who are already on that, just starting or a little bit into that entrepreneurial journey?
Network. Half of the battle is showing up to meetups. It's getting yourself out there. I could stay in and maybe I could code on this thing, or if I go out to this thing tonight, maybe I can meet some people. And that is one of the things that really helped me when I first moved out to San Francisco. Was I tried to attend as many meetups as I possibly could and meet as many people as I possibly could. And it's just like constant networking, because you never know how far your connections can take you. And all of my business now comes from connections. Like I have three main connections, or three main streams of getting clients. Like the first one is from clients, they recommend me. Second one is from other marketers, because I attend so many meetups. So like if their plate is filled, they're like, hey, let's maybe they'll recommend me, and that's happened a few times. And then with VC firms, and it's been just showing up to VC parties.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I can't tell you. I mean, if nobody listened to this podcast, I would still do it just to be able to have an excuse to meet people like you and everybody else I've had on the show. Because the way I look at it, the world is people. People make up the world, and all money, all value, all assets, all ideas are connected to people in some way. And so if you want to get a piece of that in your life, you're going to have to connect with people. You're going to have to connect with the right people and foster those relationships that will lead to opportunities to get access to those ideas and those assets and the money and the value that can be created. And so that to me is probably like success 101 is just people. And just to throw out a book recommendation there, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is your go-to book. It's kind of like the book you recommended for VC firms. You know, if you want to get to the basics of how to win friends and influence people, develop relationships and network, that's a great book for you. So we'll have that in the show notes. Mehak, what's the best way for people to connect with you? Say they want to get a few more YouTube hacks under their belt.
They can shoot me a tweet with @whatthemehak, or they can send me an email, mehak@jamochamedia.com.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Successful Dropouts, you've been hanging out with Mehak and Kylan, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed as an entrepreneur. And I think we're both pretty awesome, and you are, like we mentioned earlier, the average of the 5 people you hang around the most. So you've been hanging out with us for the last 50 minutes here. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Mehak into the search bar, and that's MEHAK, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Type that in the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish. For more information about how to drop out, grind, and succeed, go to successfuldropout.com. I also love questions. If you have a question about anything we talked about today, I want to hear from you. Go to successfuldropout.com and click the Ask Me a Question link at the top of the page. Successful Dropouts, if you could go to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review, it would help this show out a lot. I know you're busy, I know you got a lot going on, but if you do that, it helps this podcast rank, it helps other people listen to it and gain value just like you have been. Thank you so much in advance.